Now it's time to get ready to think like an ecologist. Our goal here is not just to name and identify trees, though we'll do some of that. With the help of botanist Heath Bartosh and his colleague Brian Peterson, we're also going to look for the larger stories about life on the mountain. Mount Diablo is known for the beauty and variety of its oaks, which range from small and scraggly to monumental. Some, the deciduous oaks, shed their leaves every year. Others, the live oaks, retain their leaves in winter. There's another way of grouping oaks related to fire. The deciduous blue oak can reproduce only one way, from its acorns, which are its seeds. On the other hand, live oaks can also sprout from the top of their roots. That's called stump sprouting. After the Morgan fire in 2013, it didn't take long to figure out which trees were stump sprouters. They popped up within weeks and got a big head start on the rest of the trees.
One of the other trees that really responds well after fires is bay, and fire doesn't bother. As long as they're big enough, they can come back after fire.
In several places on Mount Diablo, you can see circles of bay trees with their long, graceful leaves and powerful scent. Once you know about their ability to stump sprout, you start to wonder, did a tree in the center of the circle burn up in a fire? Did its genetically identical progeny grow up all around it? That's what Heath and Brian mean when they talk about thinking like an ecologist.
Thinking that way generates a lot of questions, not necessarily a lot of answers. You know what I mean?
You got to go scramble around and hammer plots in and collect a bunch of data.
More time in the field
to answer those questions. Yeah.
The buckeye is another important tree on Mount Diablo. It's exquisitely tuned to our Mediterranean climate. It has 5 to 7 leaflets, spread out like fingers from a hand. It's the first tree to green up after the rainy season starts, and it's the first to lose its leaves when the rains stop. It's an excellent stump sprouter, too.
I remember going on a hike in Perkins Canyon with a group of people and somebody pointing out some buckeyes and saying, "Oh, those guys are goners." And I said, just wait. You wait, they'll be back. And in fact, I visited those trees a couple times just to see what did happen to those trees, because they did look pretty severely burned, and they're alive and well.
After a fire, the stump sprouters definitely get a head start. But trees that can only reproduce from seeds have their tricks, too. Take the blue oak. It only grows in California, and it copes with tough times by developing an extensive root system early in life.
If they're big enough and they haven't been burned too severely, they may look dead for 2 years, and then they'll start to sprout up on the upper branches. It's pretty amazing.
When you run across blue oaks on Mount Diablo, they're often all the same age.
It must have been some big recruitment event at some time. Was it a fire? Maybe some other climatic reason for that big flush of oaks to grow up and make it till now.
Another group of trees that can't stump sprout are pines. Mount Diablo has 3 types: foothills, knobcones, and coulters. Foothill pines are the most numerous and the only species here at Perkins Canyon. They tend to be wispy, flexible trees with grayish needles and many trunks. Also known as gasoline trees, foothill pines, and a relative in the Sierra, the Jeffrey pine, burn more easily than other pines because they contain large amounts of N-heptene, a component of gasoline. Coulter pines grow on the north side of the mountain. Named after an Irish botanist, Thomas Coulter, they're a Southern California tree that reaches its northern limit on and around Mount Diablo. And then there's the much rarer knobcone pine. Its cones are closed. The seeds stay locked inside the cone until there's a fire. Here's Save Mount Diablo's Seth Adams on the knobcone's curious story.
The pine cones are in a circle around the trunks, tightly against the trunk, almost like a tick, and the pine cones are closed. Each year's pine cones are added onto the total. And as the trunk gets bigger, it can actually grow around the pine cones, and knob cones are known as the pine that eats itself. And then finally there's a fire. The tree burns, the pine cones pop open, seeds are scattered everywhere, and the next year you have a huge germination of pine seedlings, all the same age, all from the same year.
On the south side of the mountain, at the eastern end of Knobcone Point Road, you can see a formidable stand of knobcone pines that date back to the Black Hawk Fire of 1981. These pines are all the same age, and they're growing so close together that they're thinning themselves out through competition for water and light. When the 1977 fire blackened Mitchell Back and Donner Canyon on the north side of the mountain, locals took up a collection to replant with Monterey Pines. Now those are beautiful trees, but they're definitely not adapted to conditions on Mount Diablo. Some foothill pines and blue oaks from nurseries were planted instead. Those were the right species, but even so, almost all of them died. The solution, of course, was to let Mount Diablo's trees recover by themselves, and that's what they did. Now it's time for that walk we promised. We're going to provide a sketch of the 1.5-mile route here, but there's a confusing array of trails, so you'll also need a real map. From Clayton, take Marsh Creek Road until you reach the junction with Morgan Territory Road. Turn right, and in less than half a mile, just past a settling pond from an old mercury mine, you'll see an opening in the fence that serves as the park entrance, on your right. Start your hike there, walking 0.2 of a mile across the meadow. The meadow trail will take you toward a mushroom-shaped geologic feature called a volcanic dome. That's evidence of a time millions of years ago when magma oozed up from deep in Earth's crust. Head left and downhill toward the Perkins Creek crossing, and then up Morgan Road. 0.4 of a mile from the creek, you'll reach a sign for the single-track Perkins Trail, where you may see the remains of an old foothill pine. It used to be a stately sentinel. When we made this guide in 2018, it was a sagging snag. Lots of other foothill pines around here died too. But if fires stay away for the next few decades, the species will bounce back. As you head down the trail, scan the slopes on the other side of Perkins Canyon. They went through exciting changes in the years right after the 2013 fire, from bare soil and ash to bright green chamise sprouts, to a swath of blue lupins and orange poppies worthy of an impressionist painting. In 0.4 of a mile, you'll reach Perkins Creek again, at a crossing graced by tall sycamores. Cross the creek and head back to the meadow. In our next segment, we'll offer tips about where and when you can see some of the mountain's best wildflowers.